People think of humanism, they often define it in secular terms. Why is it important for us to redefine humanism in terms of what you call Christian humanism?
Well, I think there's good reason why humanism is defined usually in secular terms, although, as I'm trying to explain in the book, it actually has Christian roots and origins. And the reason is that secular humanism basically builds on values such as human dignity, human freedom, individuality, and the worth of the human person that derive from Christianity and from Christian roots. However, because Christians haven't had a very good record of demonstrating these values, especially if you recall the religious wars of the 17th century, that there has been a general sense that these values need to somehow be pursued without religion. And so over the course of time, humanism has become equated with what we now call secular humanism. That is the attempt to get along and into human relations entirely without religion. In fact, the religion is thought to be detrimental to anything that is good, that is rational, because of this sort of bad religious history. But it's just entirely wrong in terms of intellectual history to think that even the idea that we can progress as human beings morally derives from a religious understanding. And so the basic root of humanism, as a Christian humanism, comes from the incarnation. That's my argument in the book, because as God, the teaching was in early Christianity, as God became human so that humans could become more like God, that is, they could, through moral effort and the grace of God, of course, attain God-likeness. That's what this whole idea of moral progression, of moral optimism, of the high value of the human being derives from. And secular humanism basically assumes these values, cuts off the Christian root, and my argument in the book has been that this no longer works for a number of reasons that would take a long time to discuss, but that we now need to rediscover those basic roots.
Mm-hmm. It's often said that the Renaissance is a key turning point in our moving away from a belief in God and moving towards a humanistic view of a belief in man. And sources like Pico della Mirandola is often quoted as one of the key philosophers in this. What would you say to that time period and its effect on the development of humanism, either way?
Well, again, the problem or the issue is, how do you read the Renaissance? In what kind of developmental story do you place the Renaissance? What you just mentioned is that the Renaissance is basically sort of a proto-secularism. Secularism just wanted to come out, the glorification of the human, the dignification or the deification even of the human being, and therefore a departure from Christianity, ultimately arriving at secularism, where man is the measure, as it were, of all things. But what I've already said at the beginning gives this already a different spin. So if indeed the early Christian teaching was that through the incarnation, human beings were in fact so dignified that they were to be raised to the level of little gods, as some of the fathers put it, then the language of deification, the language of us being like little gods and being deified and so on, and the incredible worth of the human being and our creativity, derives in fact from a much earlier language, namely that of the early Christians, based on the incarnation, rather than on some departure from that. So even Pico's language we have to put into that context. And there are other writings that are often not looked at by Pico that will show you that he is much more in a general, I would even say Orthodox Christian religious context than some sort of a secularizing departure from.